So, here we are. All right. What we're going to do tonight is just sort of take a look at Isaiah 12 and take a step back and probably look at a little bit of the context of it, because I think that's important. This is the end of the first section of Isaiah. So Isaiah is usually divided into like three major sections, and this is the end of the first one. Now what I'd like to do is just kind of, instead of what I usually do, which is read the whole thing and then we'll talk about bits of it, I'm just going to like kind of talk about it as I go, if that's all right with everybody tonight. So we'll do a little bit more as we go kind of sermon. But it starts with, "In that day you will say." And before I get to the quote, anybody who's heard me preach a sermon before, what do we immediately have to do? What question immediately comes to mind from hearing the phrase, "In that day you will say"?
What type of scripture is it? Context?
Context, yes. In what day, we might ask, would I say this? Right? So, before we can get to Isaiah 12, we need to know what's in Isaiah chapter 11. And Isaiah 11 is actually a pretty famous passage. Is there anybody know Isaiah 11? Like just kind of, not like the word for word, but like what's the big famous metaphor or prophecy in Isaiah 11?
Branch from Jesse?
Yes. I think you may have cheated, but I'll allow it.
I didn't say I knew it. I looked it up.
Yes, the branch from Jesse. So, what is the branch from Jesse? It is Jesus, right? It's one of the more famous passages. Isaiah has a few consistently known as Jesus prophecies. And so I think, to Isaiah's original readers, they would have just read this as like sort of the renaissance, if you will, of the Jewish kingdom. But we now, looking at it after Jesus, we know that what was really being prophesied about here was Jesus. So I'm not going to read all of Isaiah 11, but I just want to highlight a couple things from the chapter before the one we're looking at.
Who is Jesse, by the way?
Great question. Jesse is the father of David. So you have Jesse gave birth to David. David gave birth to the line of Israelite kings or Jewish kings. And so a shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse is Isaiah 11 verse 1, which if Jesse's line is a stump, it's been cut off, it is a dead tree because there's no more king in Israel. A shoot will come up would say it is not in fact dead, right? It will live and grow once again. And as Isaiah 11 describes this shoot that will come up from the stump of Jesse, later called the root of Jesse, we learn a lot of things that sound very Jesus-like once we know Jesus is there. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, wisdom and understanding, counsel and might, delight in the fear of the Lord. Let's see, then we get sort of in the middle of the section, we get this big, long description of what it will be like when the spring from the root of Jesse will shoot up, and we have the wolf will live with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the goat, calf and lion and yearling together. And again, famous stuff, right? I think some of us, maybe not everybody, how many people of us have heard things like that before, right? The wolf will lie with the lamb, and it's kind of familiar language to some of us, perhaps, just as idyllic, like this is eventually heaven language. It gets sort of repeated in Revelation a little bit, taken out of this and other passages in Isaiah. But it goes on. It's more than just that. It also talks about the root of Jesse. This is down in verse 10 of Isaiah 11. The root of Jesse will stand as a banner for the peoples. The nations will rally to him. His resting place will be glorious. In that day, the Lord will reach out his hand a second time to reclaim the surviving remnant of his people from Assyria, and on and on and on. So, second time is going to be another gathering of the exiles, as it says in verse 12. Now, in all likelihood, this was written before the actual second exile, so this is probably a reference to Egypt. But as we know, the Israelites were exiled once again. And also, beyond that, we can read it, of course, in the context of Jesus and know that it's also talking about the fact that rather than just gathering the Jews who are scattered from many nations, it's also people from all different nations who are going to become part of this different nation, this different kingdom, that is the kingdom of God, whose banner will be the root of Jesse, Jesus, right? This is the annunciation of what is going to come in Jesus in the end of times and what is happening now in the church. This idea that out of many nations, we are forming one nation, even if we're not all in the same place, one kingdom together. And so you have this drawing on the history of Israel, the history of Judah, and then, of course, we know, like I said, leaning towards Jesus. So going back to Isaiah chapter 12, in that day, well, that day is a celebratory day, right? It's the day when Jesus reigns, when the stump of Jesse has produced a new shoot. And so this is a song for us. The next, this whole chapter, really, this is for us. You know, it's for people who are living after Jesus. And so let me read there's 2 songs that this little chapter has. And I'm going to read the first one for us, and we'll talk about it. I will praise you, Lord, although you were angry with me. Your anger has turned away, and you have comforted me. Surely God is my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid. The Lord himself is my strength and my defense. He has become my salvation. With joy you will draw water from the wells of salvation. Now this first song is a personal one, right? In that day, the you there is singular. It's coming from each individual person. And so we as people are inclined to sing this song. We're encouraged to sing this song to God. And so what does this tell us about Jesus, about what he's done, about who he is? Well, first we have, although you were angry with me, your anger has turned away, and you have comforted me. We're pretty uncomfortable in general with the idea of God's anger these days. It's not something we like to think and talk about. But one of the sort of true joys of being a Christian is the only time we have to talk about God's anger is in the context of the past, right? God's anger through Jesus, we're told that it has been wiped away. And not just for us, for everybody. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody is going to heaven, but God's anger has been satisfied once for all in the death of Jesus. And so we only have to talk about anger, as this song does, in the past tense. Although you were angry with me, your anger has turned away, and you have comforted me. And then, surely God is my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid. The Lord himself is my strength and my defense. He has become my salvation. So we have the word salvation used several times in this song. And again, who knows what it, we know that it probably meant to the original readers of Isaiah more about being saved from slavery in Egypt, right? Slavery in other nations. But again, we can read this in the world of Jesus, after Jesus, and know that it's about much more than that. It's about our eternal salvation. It's about life with God. Because salvation in this context and in our context isn't just about what happens when we die. Just like anger, the anger of God isn't something that we have to wait to see if we did enough or made the right choice to have it turned away. Salvation is not just about what happens after we die. It is about God being our strength and our defense here and now as well. And then verse 3 is an interesting one. It's not a part of the song, right? Otherwise, it would be addressed to God, right? If it said, with joy you will draw water from the wells of salvation. The rest of the song, the song itself in verses 1 and 2 is addressed. The you in that is God. But in verse 3, it kind of goes back to Isaiah here, is telling us, with joy you will draw water from the wells of salvation. And this gives us a nice picture. A well, unless something goes horribly wrong, a well does not run dry. They're a constantly refilling source of water because they tap into water sources. So this idea of drawing water from the wells of salvation is like it's not like there's a limited amount and then you're not safe anymore. You're not saved. Like that's it. You can go back into the well of salvation as many times as you want. Now, verse 4 looks a lot like verse 1, or the beginning of verse 1. But if we were Jews reading this in Hebrew, it would not look exactly the same. Because English is one of those rare languages that does not differentiate between singular and plural for the word you. But Hebrew does. And so the best way to translate the beginning of verse 4 would probably be, in that day y'all will say. Y'all is the closest English we've got to the you plural. In that day y'all will say. So now we're addressing all of us together. There's an individual song for each one of us to sing, and there's a communal song to sing. Give praise to the Lord. Proclaim his name. Make known among the nations what he has done, and proclaim that his name is exalted. Sing to the Lord, for he has done glorious things. Let this be known to all the world. Shout aloud and sing for joy, people of Zion, for great is the Holy One of Israel among you. The focus of this one's a little bit different, right? It's obviously still a joyful song, but in this case we've got a lot, it's got more of an outward focus, right? The individual song has an inward focus of God is my salvation, God was angry with me and now he's not, God is my strength and my defense. And then we turn to the congregation, right, to the community of people who have been saved, and the song that we sing together is to proclaim the name of the Lord, to make known to everybody else what he's done. Sing to the Lord, for he's done glorious things. Let this be known to all the world. For great is the Holy One of Israel among you, it says at the end. And so I wanted us to look at this little verse, this little chapter, very short chapter in Isaiah. It's very simple stuff, pretty basic for the most part, but there was something that struck me in my reading about the fact that it does have these two songs. One for us as individuals and one for us as a community. Now, obviously, both of them being songs, they're sort of declarations, right? They're meant to be heard by other people. But I think it helps give us a little bit of a framework for how we think about how much of my faith is individual, how much of it is community. Sort of a constant debate that rages today in our world of how much do we need church and other Christians and, or can you in fact be a Christian without that sort of thing? And I think Isaiah chapter 12 and the rest of the Bible would argue that we need to have a strong emphasis on both. That it does start with the individual. You can't be a Christian in the right way. You can't be living the kind of faith God wants from us without the individual piece, without the transformation of the heart, and without that sort of knowledge that I myself have been saved by God, that God is my strength and my defense. He has become my salvation. But at the same time, it also doesn't work without the community, without telling other people about God, without sharing together our faith story, and then going together to share our faith with the world. And so I think Isaiah chapter 12 is teaching us a lot. It's teaching us about the need for balance, the need to have that individual and communal faith, and the ways that we can live that out, the differences between the two. With that, let's spend some time in prayer together.